All right. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for today's program, where we are doing a virtual field trip out at Oxbow Nature Study Area. And we are going to be taking a look at some of the birds of Oxbow and the amazing adaptations that they have in order to survive at our park. So my name is Jessica, and I am a wildlife educator with the Nevada Department of Wildlife. I am joined by two amazing AmeriCorps educators, Caitlin and Amanda, who are out at Oxbow and are going to be teaching us about the birds out there today. So for this program, we are going to be using the chat throughout the program. So please make sure anything that you put in the chat is on topic and relevant to what we're talking about and appropriate, and we really appreciate that. And if you have any questions throughout the program, you can also put them in the Q&A box, and I will be responding to those throughout the program. And we can also take questions at the end as well. So we are over at Oxbow Nature Study Area, which is in Reno. And if you've never been there, it is at 3100 Dickerson Road. So Dickerson Road actually dead ends right into the park. So this is where it is located. It is about 1.5 miles west of downtown Reno, and it is right on the Truckee River. So it's a really beautiful kind of hidden gem in the middle of town. So you should definitely go check it out if you haven't been there before. So I'm going to turn it over to Caitlin, who is out at our pond over at Oxbow, and she's going to introduce us to some of the birds we can find out there. Caitlin, go ahead and take it away.
All right, thanks, Jess. So welcome everyone to Oxbow. We're currently at our pond here at Oxbow, right behind me. And today we're going to talk a little bit about the park and some of the habitats that we have here, as well as the birds that live in those habitats. So first of all, what is a habitat? So can anyone really tell me what are some of the things that we need in our habitat? There are 4 major things that every habitat needs, and you can go ahead and feel free to put those in the chat. Yes, food. So food is a huge one. Everyone needs food of some sort, whether it be, vegetation or animals, other animals. Water, yeah, definitely water. Shelter, those are absolutely important. Can anyone name the last one? So we've got food, water, shelter, and what's the last one? Does anybody know? It's something, you need to have space to move around. What is that? So it's space. So it's important that our animals have that food, water, shelter, and space. And with those things, they might have different adaptations that help them to, maybe get the food that they need or build the shelter that they need. So can anyone give me an example of an adaptation, or who wants to define adaptations for us? Animal traits. Yeah, so there are traits that an animal might have. Anyone else want to try? Put it in the chat. Awesome. So with our adaptations, we have 2 major types of adaptations. We've got behavioral, and we've also got our physical traits. So behavioral might be something that they do, or something, how they react to their environment around them. So this can be like their mating, how they interact with the other animals around them, how they react to predators, or how they react to getting their prey. The other thing is physical, which could be things that are on their body that allow them to better adapt to maybe the temperature of their environment, the shelters that they live in, or the type of food that they get. So these are all different things that we will talk about today. So we're going to start out with some of our water birds that live here in the park. So one of the big ones that you might see if you come to Oxbow is our Canada goose. We actually got our Canada goose hanging right here. So our Canada goose has a lot of different adaptations to be able to survive. They're obviously the biggest one that we see here. But one of the big ones you might notice for being a water bird is that they've got these specialized webbed feet. And with these webbed feet, they have 2 purposes. So one is to be able to kind of go through the water, be able to quickly move through the water as well. The other thing is that they are unique in that their feet are set forward so that they can walk on land effectively. So they have 2 uses, which is nice, because a lot of our ducks don't really have the same thing. Their legs are going to be out to the side. The other thing is that our Canada goose normally lives in pretty cold environments. In Reno, they're going to be a year-round resident. So that means that they are always here, but in some other regions, they might come down from Canada, which is where they get their name, and winter in warmer areas, and then go back to breed in Canada during the spring months and summer months. So they have this very thick down feather on their breasts and also covering most of their body, and this keeps them warm so they can live in colder environments, especially places close to water where it's definitely going to be a lot cooler. And this is going to make them successful at living in that environment. When it comes to food that they eat, they have this beak that allows them to have these small bristles that are on the side. It allows them to basically siphon out the water. So they will kind of go around eating on the surface of the water. And then whenever they have any kind of excess water, they can just kind of tilt their head to the side and the water will come out while keeping all of the other food inside. So they could be eating different grasses, insects, different things like that. One place that you might see them is hanging out on grass lawns. They have this very long head that allows them to kind of bend down and eat grasses and insects that are on the ground. And then this is a really big part of their diet. So they will often be seen in the water and on land. So going over here, we have a couple of our ducks. So we're going to talk first about our dabbling ducks, which our dabbling ducks are going to be ducks that hang out on the surface of the water. And I'll also have Jess put up a picture of our ducks. So we have two different types of dabbling ducks that frequent this area. We've got our wood ducks. So these are our two male and female wood ducks. And you can see that the male has got some really cool colors on them. They've got these red eyes and this very colorful beak. They almost look kind of like they're painted, which is very cool. And then the females are going to be a little bit more plain. They've got this white eye ring, and they're not as colorful. And this is pretty common for most duck species. You're going to have your male, which is your drake, and then your female, which is your hen. And with them, they are just one of the ducks that come here. We also have our mallards. So this is the male, and this is the female as well. So with our mallards, it's going to be kind of similar. Our hen's going to be a little bit more of a kind of boring drab color. And then the male is going to have that pretty green head that is so recognizable. They're very common in this area. You're definitely going to see a lot more of our mallards than our wood ducks. But they have certain adaptations that allow them to survive here as well. So our dabbling ducks are going to have a very similar beak to our Canada goose. So this is one of them up close. You can kind of see those bristles that are on the side of their bill. And like I said, this allows them to basically filter out the water while keeping in the duckweed or insects. And during the fall and the spring, we get a lot of duckweed here on the pond. So if you ever come here, you'll notice that there's a lot of these small green pieces of vegetation that hang out on top of the water. So our ducks are super important for making sure that all gets cleaned up and eaten and taken care of as well. They're also really important for keeping our ponds free of some of our insects such as mosquitoes and just other, I guess what you would say nuisance insects. So with dabbling ducks, they actually don't dive very far. They will hang out on the surface, and I'll have just put up a better photo of those bristles, but also them kind of turning upside down in the water. So this is the best way to kind of recognize them. They don't feed very far under the surface of the water. All right. So next, we're also going to talk about our diving ducks. So these are some of our diving ducks right here. We have 3 species of diving ducks that we'll talk about. So we have our golden eyes, our common mergansers, and then our hooded mergansers. So these are the 2 merganser species. And you'll notice that they are actually a lot different in size. So this is our common merganser. You might also see the females too, which have more of a crest on them. I'll have Jess also put up a picture of those as well. And you'll notice that they're very streamlined. They have this long, thin beak, and that is going to be important for making sure that they can get and hold on to fish in the water, since fish are very slippery and mucousy. And I'll also have just put up a better photo of those serrated edge beaks. So yeah, they have those serrated edges that allow them to hold on to tear up the meat. They are going to have a pretty carnivorous diet, mostly going to be of smaller fish, also crustaceans, so like crawfish, snails, different macroinvertebrates that might be in the pond. So when we say macroinvertebrates, those are like larger insects. So our dragonflies, our mayflies, stoneflies, stuff like that. The other thing about them is that they have this very streamlined body, which we kind of talk about. They can dive up to about 20 or so feet, possibly more. And they love to hang out on the river, but they also will sometimes hang out on the pond as well. The one interesting thing about their behavior is that they will actually lay eggs in multiple different nests. And this is a good way to ensure that they always have that reproductive strategy. So if one nest gets eaten by a predator, they have other eggs to take care of. So they don't put all their eggs in one nest, is the saying. They put all their eggs in multiple different nests. So there's a good picture that I'll also share that shows one female merganser with tons of babies, a couple dozen actually, and they will kind of share their chicks, their ducklings, and pass them off between different females so that they can all kind of get taken care of, since they don't really know whose are whose. So it's better to just take care of all of them instead of letting them die off for whatever reason. So that's a very interesting reproductive strategy that they have to survive as well. So lastly, we're going to talk about our coot. And you might actually see them if you come here. They're pretty common. They're very strange looking birds. So they are a water bird, but they're not a duck. They are a type of rail. So they're in the rail family. And they kind of look like chickens almost. So they have this white beak, and then they have this very small black head with a grayish black body. And you'll notice a little bit, I'll also have just put up a better picture of this as well, but they have these lobed feet, which are good for walking on land, but also swimming through the water. So they don't have the webbed feet, like, let's just compare. So this one has the webbed feet, and this one has the lobed feet. But this allows them to still get some resistance to swim through the water, and then also to be able to walk on land so they can spread out their feet, distribute their weight, and then not be able to slide or slip and slide in the mud. So it's a super important adaptation that they have. They're also going to be eating mostly just vegetation and small insects, but as opposed to our ducks, they don't really have that flat bill with the siphoning, so they're going to be eating mostly on land, but they hang out in the water as well. All right, so I will quickly hand it back to Jess. We're going to go to a more wooded part of the park and talk about some of our woodpeckers, raptors, and other perching birds that we have there. But she's going to play a quick game while we get settled over there.
Perfect. Thanks so much, Caitlin. All right, everybody. And if you have any questions that we haven't gotten to, you can go ahead and put those in the Q&A as well, and I can also read those out. But yes, we're gonna play a quick little recap game of who's who. So go ahead and put it into the chat if you think you know which of the animals that we just discussed that I will be talking about. So first up, we'll give you clues one at a time, and Miss Jess is gonna help me read out some of the answers that we get. So first up, your very first clue is I have webbed feet. So we talked about a couple different animals that have webbed feet. So we'll probably need another clue. Number two is I make a loud honking noise. So if you have any guesses about what animal that we just discussed has webbed feet and makes a loud honking noise, go ahead and put it into the chat if you think you know who the answer is.
We've got a few votes for the Canada goose.
Few votes for the goose. All right, I like it. We'll have to double check and see. We have fluffy down feathers to keep me warm. And lastly, I love to eat insects and grasses. Do we have any other votes, or are they all for the Canada goose?
We have one for the mallard, but the majority is saying Canada goose.
All right, definitely. You all got it. Great job. Definitely the Canada goose. Next up on our Who Am I? Number one, I have red eyes. So when you were looking at those pictures, did you notice anybody that had red eyes? Clue number two is I have lobes on my feet. So not webbed feet, but lobes. Any guesses so far?
No guesses yet.
All right, we'll give you another one. Number three is my call sounds like a squeaky toy. I'm not sure if we covered that one, but this particular bird, when you do hear him out on the water, do make a funny little noise that literally sounds like a dog squeaky toy.
Awesome. We have a few votes for the American coot.
Perfect. Great job, everyone. So this one is the American coot. So next time you're out at a waterway, you'll have to listen closely and see if you can hear them making those funny squeaking noises. All right, next, who am I? I have bristles on my bill. So those little tiny spiky things on the edge of the bill. Number 2, I have a pretty green head. Any guesses so far with bristles on the bill and a pretty green head?
We've got 1 vote, 2 votes for the mallard.
2 votes for the mallard. All right. I feed on duckweed. So duckweed is that little green stuff that grows on the top of the water that kind of looks like algae. Super important food source for a lot of ducks. And our 4th clue is you can find me all over the place. So these are pretty common birds. Do we have any other guesses? Yes.
It looks like overwhelmingly we are deciding that that is the mallard. Are we right?
I believe we are right. Yes, that is our mallard. Okay, our very last who am I recap. Number 1 is I love to dive. So this is a diving bird. Number 2, I eat fish, insects, and worms. So it seems to be a bird that is carnivorous. Number 3 is I have serrated teeth. Any guesses so far?
No guesses yet. Do we have one more clue?
I believe so. You might see me with a dozen or more chicks. So if you remember what bird we saw that had all of the chicks following her, it's kind of a tough one. You probably just learned about it today. They're very cool though. Any guesses, Jess?
Yeah, we've got 1 for the wood duck, 1 for the goose, and a couple for the merganser.
There it is, the merganser, yes. So if you have never seen a merganser, they are very cool. I like these birds because it is one of the few ducks I feel where the female actually looks cooler than the male. Normally the males get to have all the fun colors and fun feathers and stuff, but the females, like in this picture, you can see she's got that brown red head and then she kind of has a little mohawk behind her head. So I really like these birds and they're pretty common in the area, so you can sometimes see them. Is Caitlin almost ready?
Yes, we are ready over here. So we'll throw it back to Caitlin.
Perfect. All right.
All right. Okay. So we talked a little bit about the birds that live in our aquatic habitats. So now we're going to talk about some of the birds that live in our woodland habitats. And as you can see behind me, definitely a very big woodland habitat. I'm currently in the shade of a giant cottonwood tree. So that is kind of the features that you would see if you came and visited our park. But we're going to talk a little bit about, first of all, our perching birds. Oh, sorry, our woodpeckers are going to be first. Whoops. So we have a couple different types of woodpeckers. We have 3 species of woodpeckers in the park. And we're going to talk a little bit about how to identify them and also their adaptations. So the first ones, and I'll have Jess put up a picture of them, is going to be our hairy and our downy woodpeckers. They look very similar. They both have black and white barring on the back of their body. And they also have, the males are going to have a red cap on their head. But there are a couple differences between them. The hairy is going to be much bigger and also have a longer beak. And then we have the downy, which is going to be smaller with a shorter beak. But that being said, they still kind of operate the same. They're going to be, doing the same thing as all woodpeckers do. The other one that we have is our northern flicker. So our northern flicker is going to have these red shafts on their primary feathers. And if you are looking at them from below, they make a beautiful red color as they flap through the sky. You can see those flashes of red, which is kind of why they call them a flicker. It's a flickering red color. This is a male and a female, and you can kind of see it, but our male, which is this one, is going to have a red mustache. And our female doesn't have that as much, but they also both have this black bib and these speckled breast colors. So that's a good way to identify them as well. And with our woodpeckers, they have a number of very cool, very interesting adaptations. So one of the things is that they have zygodactyl feet. So I'll kind of bring these up here. So this is a good comparison of the different types of feet that we have. So one is going to be the normal type of foot that most birds have, most perching birds at least. And it's going to be 1 in the back and 3 in the front. And then our zygodactyl feet, that our woodpeckers have are going to have 2 in the front and 2 in the back. And that's going to be incredibly important for them to be able to perch and sit up very erect while they are able to peck at whatever they're pecking at on the tree. And with our pecking, you're probably wondering, how many pecks can they do per minute? So does anyone want to take a guess about how many pecks that a woodpecker does? How many pecks can a woodpecker peck? Do we have any guesses coming through in the chat? 3 pecks per minute?
30 per minute.
30 per minute? Okay.
50.
50. All right. Well, that's all really good guess. So actually they can peck about 200 pecks per minute. So that's a lot. And you're probably wondering, how do they not get tired? So they can actually peck very quickly, 200 pecks per minute, and then they have to rest and let their body cool down before they can start pecking again. So it is kind of this like very ramped up energy, and then they have to cool down for a minute before they can keep doing that. They actually take about 1,000 G-force units to the head while they peck, which is pretty crazy in comparison with us. So if you think about it, we can withstand about 5 to 10 G-force units, and that would be roughly going on a pretty rough roller coaster ride. So they are withstanding 1,000 G-force units, which is pretty crazy. One thing is that they are able to protect themselves with special adaptations. So one is their skull. They have a tongue that wraps around their head that provides a little bit of cushion, but it's also super long. So they can easily kind of grab grubs and insects out of whatever they are pecking a hole into. So they will peck their hole, use that tongue to probe around, and it's a very interesting adaptation that they have and very specialized. And with our woodpeckers, they, like I said, they have those zygodactyl feet, so they can stay upright, peck very strongly, and they won't fall off, and they can kind of anchor themselves to the tree. They're going to be eating grubs, insects, different kinds of maybe like larger like caterpillars and stuff like that. So that's going to be mostly what they eat. And you will definitely see them around the park with like a loud drumming noise. You can look up. They're usually going to be crawling up the side of a tree trunk. So that's the best way to find them. So next we're going to look at a couple of our perching birds. So the first one is our robin, and I'll have Jess put up a photo. And our robin is going to be one of the most common birds that we have in the park. They're really recognizable by that orangey rufusy breast, and also they're gray all over with a white eye ring. And they have a very recognizable sound, and I'll have Jess play that for you. You probably have definitely heard a robin before. Cool. So they definitely are what we call like the sound of spring, but they are not just a springtime bird. They are out all year round. And one of the reasons for this is they actually create roughly 2 to 3 nests a year. So this is a robin's nest. The two will work together. They are a monogamous pair, and they will kind of create a really rounded nest with mud, sticks, different grasses and whatnot. And they will either nest on the ground or up in trees. And they do 3 different nests per year. And this is in order to ensure their success, which is why we have so many robins, because they are very successful breeders. The other thing is that they have a couple different adaptations to live in this area. So one is they have a very long kind of sharp beak, and this allows them to pick berries off of trees and eat them. Also, it allows them to pick worms out of the ground, so they can kind of probe into the ground, grab those worms and digest them. And they have a very special digestive system, which allows them to kind of digest those waxy substances or that slimy mucousy substance that's on top of worms and other grubs. And this is pretty unique to them, although some other birds can do it. They have what we call perching feet. So when they do perch, they have that 1 thumb in the back and the 3 in the front. So they can grab onto a branch or whatever, and that tendon will lock in place so that they don't get tired from sitting there all day long. The other thing about them is that they have a square tail, which allows them to maneuver through the forest pretty well. They can fly at speeds up to 20 miles per hour while maneuvering through heavy branches and wooded areas, which makes them really adapted to this specific environment. The other ones that we have that are pretty similar are going to be our jays. So this is our scrub jay, and this is our Steller's jay, and these are our scrub jays, but I'll also have Jess put up a photo of them comparing them. So our Steller's jays are going to have this black crest. They're going to be an all over blue color. And it's pretty hard to tell the males from the females. Then we also have our scrub jays, which are pretty similar, but they don't have the black crest, and they're going to be more of a whitish gray color on the breast and a blue all over. They also have those perching toes so that they can stay perched. They have a couple different behavioral adaptations that are really unique to jays. They're very smart and social. So one thing that they do is that they can mimic almost anything. So they're very good at mimicking calls of predators. And one of the ways that they are able to keep their territory safe is that they will mimic the sound of a red-tailed hawk. So this keeps any other birds in the area away because they want to run and hide if they hear that red-tailed hawk is one of their main predators. So they kind of are able to keep everyone out. The other thing that they are good at doing is they're very social and good at caching. So they're very good at finding food together and remembering their caching locations. So when we say caching, that means that they can actually take some of their nuts or seeds or whatever that they have and find locations to hide them. So they might hide them in holes that woodpeckers have created, or just on the ground in different little pits or whatever that they might find. And that allows them to have food throughout the winter or wherever food is scarce. The other thing about them is that they are actually very, they tend to harass birds in their area. So they will harass bigger birds that come into their area. They will flock them and create a lot of noises. So you might be walking through the park and just hear a berating jay call a bunch of them. So that's pretty common to hear. And it's good to look around because you might actually see like an owl or a hawk or something that might be in their area. Lastly, they have these very robust beaks, and this allows them to crack open seeds and also probe for insects as well. All right. So our last perching bird that we will talk about is our red-winged blackbird. And you will notice that it has these very bright red wings. So these get more brilliant in the springtime. So right around now, we're starting to see these red-winged blackbirds start to do their mating calls. They're starting to create their nests and everything like that. So it is a little bit of a good time to see them out and about. They like to use this woodland habitat, but they also really love the riparian habitat as well. One thing that they do have is this very long kind of sharp beak. This allows them to do what we call gaping, which means that they will kind of shuffle through vegetation that might be on the ground. So maybe wet clumps of grass or duckweed or whatever is around kind of in aquatic habitats. And they can kind of take their beaks and do this motion. So they push everything out of the way, and this allows them to kind of probe through and look for insects that might be under all that vegetation or in the grass. They also have a very recognizable call. So you'll notice that if you're out at the pond, you can hear them, and I'll actually have Jess play a little sample of what they sound like. All right. So they kind of sound like a metallic door swinging open and closed. It's a very weird sound. But they use that to defend their territories. What they'll do is they might nest in cattails. So on the bottom of the cattails, they will have their nest, and at the top, there will be a sentry. So maybe it will be one male or a female. Usually it's the male, and they'll be watching out for any predators coming into their area, and they'll use that call to alert other nests in the area that there's a predator, and also to defend their own territories. So it's really interesting to kind of see them very evenly spaced on the cattails if you're ever hanging out by the pond. All right, so that's our perching birds. And lastly, we're going to talk a little bit about our raptors. So this is our red-tail hawk, but we have 3 different raptors in this area that we are going to talk about. So we have our red-tail, we have our red shoulder, and also our Cooper's hawk. So the big thing with our raptors is they have special adaptations to be top predators. So they're going to be very agile, very quick, good at killing. This is all that they're adapted for. So with our red tail, you'll probably notice that they have these very sharp talons. And that is super important for them to be able to dip down and grab something, to hold on to it very tightly. Also with sharp puncturing talons, they can puncture, they can rip meat and serrate things. They also have this curved beak, which I'll actually use this skull for. This is actually a great horned owl skull, but I'm just using it because it's a better example. So they have this curved, sharp beak, and this allows them to still puncture and also, tear up meat and serrate things. They also have these forward-facing eyes. Owls are going to have eyes that are stuck in place, but they can move their eyes on raptors, so they're a little different. But those forward-facing eyes are super important. They have really good sense of sight. So they're able to be circling above and they can see even the smallest movements. And with raptors, their vision is going to be 5 to 10 times better than ours. So they can see even the smallest movements, smallest differences, and they're very good at detecting that. The other thing that they have is that they're going to be very agile flyers. They have a carnivorous diet, and they also have very good sense of hearing. So you'll notice that when you're in the park, these guys are going to be very elusive. They're not really going to be easy to see. You might see these red tails hanging out in the park and flying above, circling around, but our Cooper's hawk and our red-shouldered hawks aren't going to be as obvious. So that's the biggest way to tell the difference, is that they have these orange kind of tail feathers, but our other birds do not. So for example, our red-shouldered hawk is going to have more of a orangey breast with the black and white feathers on the back. But with that, we're kind of wrapping it up. So to kind of conclude and to recap, our woodland habitat birds are going to have different adaptations than our aquatic habitat birds. Does anyone want to name one of the main differences in the chat? So like, what's one of the biggest adaptations that you notice that our woodland birds have that our aquatic birds don't, or vice versa?
Water, different feet.
Yeah, so feet are definitely going to be super important. Our water birds are going to have more of a bill instead of a beak, which means it's flat. And these guys are going to have more of like these longer, more robust beaks. Definitely. And that definitely reflects the type of diet they have. So our woodland birds are going to be hanging out more in the trees, and they're going to be eating insects and maybe berries or vegetation that lives on the trees, whereas our ducks and our water birds are going to be eating whatever's in the water and kind of hanging out around, so like in the reeds or in the cattails. So those are some different adaptations that we like to talk about when we discuss the different types of birds that live in our pond and our park as well. So with that, does anybody have any questions?
Awesome job, Caitlin. Thank you so much for going over all that with us. We do have a question about the woodpeckers. Is it true that hairy woodpeckers mainly stay on the main part of the trunk, and then downies are typically on the branches of a tree? Have you heard that before?
I don't know for sure if that's a thing, but I noticed that when I have viewed them, that the downy woodpeckers definitely like to kind of stay on the outer branches, where the hairy woodpeckers do kind of stay on the trunk. But I don't know if that's just observational or if it's fact, so I can't really say for sure.
For sure. I think that we can anecdotally say that that is common, but not necessarily a rule.
Yeah, not sure.
That is the only open question for the moment. So if anybody else has any other questions, you can put them into the Q&A or the chat. But otherwise, we really appreciate everyone taking the time to join us, and we really hope you get the chance to come out to Oxbow if you have never been here before.
Yes. All right.
All right, and we've just got a couple of thank yous coming in, but I don't see any other questions.
Cool.
So thank you so much, Caitlin, and everyone have a great rest of your day.